Hello, I'm Nathan Martin with the Divine Pollination Hive, free with EFT.com and divinepollination.com. In the news lately, there's been a big push about gender confusion. Guys wanting to be girls, girls wanting to be guys, people not being satisfied with who they are. This is a good opportunity to actually look into why this is happening and what really is the issue. What does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a woman? But in this particular episode, we're going to actually speak about what does it mean to be a man. But the same principles will apply to women as well. And I may go into that in a separate video. What does it mean to be a man? Well, there's something to really look at in this whole thing, and it's being and doing. And there's some other factors involved, such as stereotypes or images. Now, an image is something that you're shown on TV of something that you're supposed to be or do in order to be a certain thing. Like if you want to be sexy, you have to wear this makeup. If you want to be a masculine man, you have to have a certain kind of muscles, a certain kind of clothing. You have to have a certain kind of persona. You have to create your identity around this masculinity. You have to be fighting. You have to be aggressive. You have to push your feelings down. And that's really what it means to be a man, at least according to this image. And then we look back through history. Well, the image of men was this. And then we start picking these stereotypes like men are aggressive, men fight. Men start wars. Men are left-brainers. They're always using their left brain, and they're just, always critical thinking, and they're never flowing. What other kinds of things are men doing? Men are not in touch with their feelings. Men are not sensitive. And if they are sensitive, then they're effeminate. Oh my God. To be powerful and stable, and they need to not tell you how they're really feeling. And they need to be unshakable in a storm. And this is the whole persona of what men should be. And we create these stereotypes. And now, every time we're around a masculine man, or what we perceive as a masculine man, we now may feel like we have to compete. And so we shove down our masculinity because they are dominating us, or they're beating us with their masculine, because they're doing it better than us. And this brings us to the other point of doing versus being. When you are something, you don't have to do something to be that. Now, I don't have to do anything to be a man because I have a penis and testicles between my legs, and I'm designed as a man. I have facial hair, leg hair. I don't have to do anything to be a male. Okay, I just am a male. I'm being male all the time. Now, because we've added this image to what a man should be, now we have to go above and beyond just being a male. And now we must start acting like a male. And a male mans up. A male is supposed to do all these extra criteria to prove that they are male. Now, if they're trying to prove that they are something that they already are, actually, then they're going to also face rejection. If you don't have to prove something, you can't be rejected. But if you do have to prove something, you can be rejected. And so people are trying to prove their masculinity by, going out on the football field or on the tennis court or whatever sport that they have taken up, and they have to prove that they are man enough to fight through the pain and to be a certain way. Now, this is bullshit. This is absolute bullshit. This is not what a man is. This is what society has carefully crafted a man to be. Interestingly enough, these images are given to us by people with an agenda, that they're critical thinking. They're thinking, how can I best control a person? Well, one of the things is you have to make them forget who they are and then try to prove who they are. The best way to control a man is to make them forget that they're a man and then make them have to prove that they're a man. But logically, I don't have to do anything to prove that I'm a man except for unzip my pants and show my penis, my beard, whatever. I mean, this is my gender. This is what I came into the world as. This is who I am. For all those the people out there, like, we have to accept what is. Well, what is I'm a man. Okay, and I don't have to do anything to prove it. I don't have to beat up this guy. I don't have to be aggressive. I don't have to start a war. I don't have to defend my honor. I don't have to defend her honor. I don't have to be romantic like the romantic comedies say. I don't have to provide for my family in a certain way No, I just have to be a man, and then from my being a man, actions follow. I don't have to do anything. There's a lot of pressure to be a man by acting, to prove it. But what if you don't have to prove anything? What if you just are a man? You don't have to show your hairy chest. You don't have to beat other men down into submission. That would cause a little bit of gender confusion if you're always trying to compete and you finally realize that I'm really bad at acting this way. I'm really bad acting out the stereotypical man. I'm exhausted. I cannot compete with all these men out there. So I must be effeminate because I can't outcompete them in the doing of this action. So I must be effeminate. Maybe I'm a girl. Maybe I'm attracted to these guys because they're beating me. Maybe I'm attracted to men because I don't want to fight them anymore. I'd rather they just, I would rather just relax and be myself around them. And that must mean I'm a girl. I'm a woman. I'm feminine. But no, you are a male. Now, you do have masculine and feminine energies within you because all people have both. But a lot of this confusion about what side does what is because we're not really understanding ourselves, and we're not understanding women either. If I really understood a woman, then I would understand that she is a woman not because she acts a certain way, she behaves with a certain pattern, but that because she has a vagina and breasts. No matter how big or small the breasts may be, they have breasts. They have a vagina. They do not have a penis. They are a woman. This is what is in this moment. Any confusion comes from the societal standards that are placed upon society. And even some of the sociologists or the anthropologists that might try to, look into these gender roles and back in history, this is how men acted. But we're still trying to emulate ourselves after historical men now. We're not trying to be modern men. We're trying to be historical men. But it's still an image. It's still an outside-in action. We're not being a man and then acting. We're seeing what a man looks like and modeling ourselves and creating an identity after that. And then we have to find our niche. What kind of man do I want to be? Do I want to be an athletic man? Do I want to be a studious man? Do I want to be a very critical thinking man? There's all kinds of choices for what kind of man you can be, outside in. But you're never really being a man. You're doing what you think a man should be. There's a big difference. Now, how liberating might it be if you stopped having to act and you could just turn on your masculinity and rest comfortably in your masculine? I am masculine because I am a male. I allow my masculinity to flow through me and I get to be it. And now, however I choose to express my masculinity is how I choose to express my masculinity. And it might play out in ways that look stereotypical. I might have big muscles. I might have a nice garden and I'm working in my hands and farming. I might, enjoy sports. But that doesn't mean that makes me a man. I didn't man up and do that. I did those things because I'm expressing my manlyhood. I'm expressing my masculinity. I'm being with it. And I also might have feelings because I'm a man. Men have feelings. Actually, they've observed little boys that have that they come out and oftentimes are even more sensitive than girls. Unfortunately, the girls get most of the attention and the guys don't. I'm going to read an article for you here really quick about that. Okay, I'm going to read this article by rawstory.com called Masculinity is Killing Men, The Roots of Men and Trauma. It's by Kaylee Holloway. And I think it's really important to discuss this. I'm not going to read the whole article, but I'm going to read parts of it, actually majority of it. I think it's really important. So it starts off, the 3 most destructive words that every man receives when he is a boy is when he's told to be a man. Joe Ehrman, coach and former NFL player. If we are honest with ourselves, we have long known that masculinity kills men in ways both myriad and measurable. While social constructions of femininity demand that women be thin, beautiful, accommodating, and some unattainable balance of virginal and fuckable, social constructions of masculinity demand that men constantly prove and reprove the very fact that they are, well, men. Both ideas are poisonous and potentially destructive. But statistically speaking, the number of addicted and afflicted men in their comparatively shorter lifespans proves masculinity is actually the more effective killer, getting the job done faster and in greater numbers. Masculinity's death tolls are attributed to its more specific manifestations: alcoholism, workaholism, violence. Even when it does not literally kill, it causes a sort of spiritual death, leaving many men traumatized, disassociated, and often unknowingly depressed. These issues are heightened by race, class, sexuality, and other marginalizing factors. But here let's focus on early childhood and adolescent socialization overall. To quote poet Elizabeth Barrett Browning, "'Tis not in death that men die most, and for many men the process begins long before manhood." The emotionally damaging masculinization of boys starts even before boyhood, in infancy. Psychologist Terry Real, in his 1998 book I Don't Want to Talk About It, Overcoming the Secret Legacy of Male Depression, he highlights numerous studies which find the parents often unconsciously begin projecting a kind of innate manliness, and thus a diminished need for comfort, protection, and affection onto baby boys as young as newborns. This despite the fact that gendered behaviors are absent in babies. Male infants actually behave in ways our society defines as feminine. As Real explains, little boys and little girls start off equally emotional, expressive, and dependent, equally desirous of physical affection. At the youngest ages, both boys and girls are more like stereotypical girl. If any differences exist, little boys are, in fact, slightly more sensitive and expressive than little girls. They cry more easily, seem more easily frustrated, appear more upset when a caregiver leaves the room. Yet both mothers and fathers imagine inherent sex-related differences between baby girls and boys, even when researchers controlled for babies: weight, length, alertness, and strength. Parents overwhelmingly reported that baby girls were more delicate and softer than baby boys. They imagined baby boys to be bigger and generally stronger. When a group of 204 adults was shown the same video of the same baby crying and given differing information about the baby's sex, they judged the female baby to be scared, while the male baby was described as angry. Intuitively, these differences in perception create correlating differences in the kind of parental caregiving newborn boys receive. In the words of the researchers themselves, it would seem reasonable to assume that a child who is thought to be afraid is held and cuddled more than a child who is thought to be angry. That theory is bolstered by other studies Real cites, which consistently find that from the moment of birth, boys are spoken to less than girls, comforted less, nurtured less. To put it bluntly, we begin emotionally shortchanging boys right out of the gate at the most vulnerable point in their lives. It's a pattern that continues throughout childhood and into adolescence. Real cites a study that found both mothers and fathers emphasized achievement and competition in their sons and taught them to control their emotions. Another way of saying boys are tacitly instructed to ignore or downplay their emotional needs and wants. Similarly, parents of both sexes are more punitive towards their sons, presumably working under the assumption that boys can take it. Beverly I. Fagot, the late researcher and author of The Influence of Sex of Child on Parental Reactions to Toddler Children, found that parents gave positive reinforcement to all children when they exhibited same-sex preferred behaviors, as opposed to cross-sex preferred. Parents who said they accepted sex equality nonetheless offered more positive responses to little boys when they played with blocks and offered negative feedback to girls when they engaged in sporty behavior. And while independent play, away from parents, and independent accomplishments were encouraged in boys, girls received more positive feedback when they asked for help. As a rule, these parents were unaware of the active role they played in socializing their children in accordance with gender norms. Fagot notes that all stated they treated sons and daughters the same, without regard to sex, a claim sharply contradicted by study findings. Undeniably, these kinds of lessons impart deeply damaging messages to both girls and boys, and have lifelong and observable consequences. But whereas, as Terry Real says, girls are allowed to maintain emotional expressiveness and cultivate connection, boys are not only told they should suppress their emotions, but that their manliness essentially depends on them doing so. Despite its logic-empty premise, our society has fully bought into the notion that the relationship between manliness and masculinity is somehow incidental and precarious, and embraced the myth that boys must be turned into men, that boys, unlike girls, must achieve masculinity. This is a real problem. Men achieving masculinity. We're not just masculine, we have to compete for it. We have to be the most masculine in the room, or we have to prove our masculinity to our masculine brothers instead of just being masculine because we're, well, men. Let me start reading again. Little boys internalize this concept early. When I spoke to Real, he indicated that research suggests they begin to hide their feelings from as young as 3 to 5 years old. It doesn't mean that they have fewer emotions, but they're already learning the game, that it's not a good idea to express them, Real says. Boys, conventional wisdom holds, are made men not by merely aging into manhood, but through the crushing socialization just described. But Real points out what should be obvious about cisgender boys. They do not need to be turned into males. They are males. Boys do not need to develop their masculinity. It is impossible to downplay the concurrent influence of images and messages about masculinity embedded in our media. TV shows and movies inform kids, and all of us really, not so much about who men and women are, but who they should be. While much of the scholarship about gender depictions in media has come from feminists deconstructing the endless damaging representations of women, there's been far less research specifically about media-perpetuated constructions of masculinity. But certainly, we all recognize the traits that are valued among men in film, television, video games, comic books, and more: strength, valor, independence, and the ability to provide and protect. While depictions of men have grown more complicated, nuanced, and human over time, we're long past the days of Father Knows Best and Superman archetypes. Certainly masculine qualities remain valued over others. As Amanda D. Lotz writes in her 2014 book, Cable Guys, Television and Masculinities in the 21st Century, though depictions of men in media have become more diverse, storytelling has nevertheless performed significant ideological work by consistently supporting male characters it constructs as heroic or admirable, while denigrating others. So although television series may have displayed a range of men and masculinities, they also circumscribed a preferred or best masculinity through attributes that were consistently idealized. We are all familiar with these recurring characters. They are fearless action heroes, prostitute fucking psychopaths in Grand Theft Auto, schlubby, housework-averse sitcom dads with inexplicably beautiful wives, bumbling stoner 20-somethings who still manage to nail the hot girl in the end, and still the impenetrable Superman. Even sensitive, lovable, every guy Paul Rudd somehow mans up before the credits roll in his films. Here it seems important to mention a National Coalition on Television Violence study which finds that on average, 18-year-old American males have already witnessed some 26,000 murders on television, almost all of them committed by men. Couple those numbers with violence in film and other media, and the numbers are likely astronomical. The result of all this, the early denial of boys' feelings, and our collective insistence that they follow suit, is that boys are effectively cut off from their feelings and emotions, their deepest and most vulnerable selves. Historian Stephanie Kuntz has labeled this effect the masculine mystique. It leaves little boys, and later men, emotionally disembodied, afraid to show weakness and often unable to fully access, recognize, or cope with their feelings. In his book, Why Men Can't Feel, Marvin Allen states, "These messages encourage boys to be competitive, focused on external success, rely on their intellect, withstand physical pain, and repress their vulnerable emotions. When boys violate the code, it is not uncommon for them to be teased, shamed, or ridiculed." The cliche about men not being in touch with their emotions says nothing about inherent markers of maleness. It instead identifies behavioral outcomes that have been rigorously taught, often by well-meaning parents and society at large. As Terry Real said when I spoke to him, this process of disconnecting boys from their feminine, or more accurately, human emotional selves is deeply harmful. Every step is injurious, says Real. It's traumatic to be forced to advocate half of your own humanity. Now here's an important paragraph, and I really want to emphasize this one because it really goes into the trauma aspect of it and the acting out, why boys and men act out and why women internalize. So this is really important part. That trauma makes itself plain in the ways men attempt to sublimate feelings of emotional need and vulnerability. While women tend to internalize pain, men instead act it out against themselves and others. As Real told me, women blame themselves, they feel bad, they know they feel bad, they'd like to get out of it. Boys and men tend to externalize stress. We act it out and often don't see our part in it. It's the opposite of self-blame. It's more like feeling like an angry victim. The National Alliance on Mental Illness states that across race and ethnicity, women are twice as likely to experience depression as men. But Real believes men acting out behaviors primarily serve to mask their depression, which goes largely unrecognized and undiagnosed. So I skipped down a little bit. I went past a little bit there, and now I'm going to continue on. Masculinity is both difficult to achieve and impossible to maintain, a fact that Real notes is evident in the phrase fragile male ego. Because men's self-esteem often rests on so shaky a construct, the effort to preserve it can be all-consuming. Avoiding the shame that's left when it's peeled away can drive some men to dangerous ends. This is not to absolve people of responsibility for their actions, but it does drive home the forces that underlie and inform behaviors we often attribute solely to individual issues, ignoring the root causes. And here we go, the Hermetic principle of cause and effect. We really need to stop putting band-aids on effects, and we need to start asking why to get to their causes. So in this case, the root cause is how we are training our boys to be men. Rather than allowing them to be men, allowing their masculinity to come through, we're telling them what a man looks like, and then we're putting this pressure on them to be that. And this effort is all-consuming. And this is shame. And so I want to explain a little bit about shame. Shame is something we are unable to do, and guilt is feeling bad for something we've already done. So if I'm feeling ashamed, it's because I can't be something or I can't do something. So in this case, we feel ashamed because we can't feel masculine unless we're acting a certain way. And so anything that goes against that, we're like, whoa, I can't do that because now I feel ashamed. We're always acting with the shame underlying everything. And then when we do act and it's wrong and it's bad because we're trying to get around and act away from our shame, we're going to do things that are harmful to others. And then we're going to feel guilty for that. So shame comes first, and guilt is the effect of trying to avoid the shame. But really, deep down, we're ashamed because we're not men. All men are ashamed. Now, they can go deep into their actions, and they can run away from their shame, and then they can do a lot of things they should feel guilty for. But that doesn't mean that they're not ashamed. They're ashamed because they're not masculine. They have to act masculine. I'm going to go down further now. When masculinity is defined by absence, when it sits, as it does, on the absurd and fallacious idea that the only way to be a man is to not acknowledge a key part of yourself, the consequences are both vicious and soul-crushing. The resulting displacement and disassociation leaves men yet more vulnerable, susceptible, and in need of crutches to help allay the pain created by our demands of manliness. As Terry Real writes, a depressed woman's internalization of pain weakens her and hampers her capacity for direct communication. A depressed man's tendency to extrude pain may render him psychologically dangerous. We have set an unfair and unachievable standard, and in trying to live up to it, many men are slowly killing themselves. We have to move far beyond our outdated ideas of masculinity and get past our very ideas about what being a man is. We have to start seeing men as innately so, with no need to prove who they are to themselves or anyone else. This concludes part 1 of Be a Man, Redefining Masculinity. And if you're interested in continuing on and doing an EFT session and tapping on this limiting belief so that we can clear our energy field and reprogram our mind to think in a new way so that we can be rather than do masculine, check out part 2. I'm Nathan Martin with the Divine Pollination Hive, freewitheft.com, and theunityprocess.com. Be well.